Alright, I've got the bar in the fire. I think this is a piece of 3/16 by 3/4, which is not a bad size for something like a ladle handle. And my first operation will be to make the profile of the handle. Just saying that if this was a handle, it would be a little more rounded, so that if that was the top of the handle, it would bevel. Rounded. Just very gently crowned. Alright, goes back in the fire. I'm going to take about an inch of this bar at the end, and I'm going to draw it out into a long, thin taper. I need to have a tapered piece that's about 6 inches long on the end of this bar. On a nice high heat. I'm still having a little trouble getting the camera set up so that I can give you an idea of the true color of the steel. I've got filters and lots of lights, and it's getting closer, but it still appears to be hotter in the video than it actually is. That's a nice bright yellow, about an inch. There's a nice radius on this part of the anvil, which helps keep you from having chop marks in that transition. So that's the start of the rat tail. Now it's just drawing that out until it's about 6 inches long. All of this is happening in real time. I'm going to see if I can't do this all in one go without any editing, so that you'll get a real idea of the time. Okay, back in the fire. As it gets thinner, it takes less time to heat up that little rat tail. One of the reasons reasons I like hand crank blowers is because I can feather the heat. Sometimes all you need is a light soaking heat when a taper gets to be very thin. It's so easy to burn them up. Oh, the longer it took. Right, a little longer, back in the fire. And again, the thinner it gets, the less time it takes to heat up. Back in the fire. I try and keep it at an even thickness until closer to the end so that there's enough mass on the tip so that it doesn't overheat and get too hot. It's very easy to get the tip too hot. Alright, back in the fire. Right now, that's 5 inches long, so I can start to round it from the square and work the tip more. Because again, I've been leaving the tip heavy to help keep it from burning up, because it'll overheat quite quickly. The other thing that happens as it gets thin is it cools off so fast that you only get 10 or 15 seconds to actually hit it. I'm knocking the corners off, starting to round it. Just a little rounded on the first bit. Okay, and I've left the last inch or so a little heavier square, so I have to draw that into a bit of a taper now and work it down. I saved that till last, again, because it is very prone to overheating. You don't want that little thin tip to burn off. And it only takes a moment to get it hot enough. Okay, go back. And if you hit it too hard, you'll flatten it out and you'll end up with something that looks like a little thin screwdriver instead of a square. So you do have to have a little light touch. See, I've got a tiny little flake there, which was an edge to fold it over. So I am going to go and grab a file and actually file off that little flake. Because a little flake like that as a fold will just not go away, and it will make a thin spot in such a thin paper. So I have a file. This is an old, mostly worn out file, and you see that little tiny folded over part right there. I will file out that little tiny fold. This doesn't happen often, but you do need to know what to do to get rid of it. Otherwise, you will be in sorry shape. All right, I think I got it. I got it hot again. Okay. These little thin tapered ends, you have to be very careful that you don't squash them, because if you hit them too hard, you won't be able to bring them back without them folding over. You don't want to turn it into a little thin piece of sheet metal. You want to keep it in the ratio close to a square bar which is why you end up hitting it hardly at all. I can still see a little bit of that fold right there. I'm going to take that little bit. That's me taking that little tiny bit of the fold out of the corner there. That would be no end of trouble if I leave it there. There, not too bad. Back in the fire. The other thing that happens as you work is that the scaling is also removing stuff from the metal. So not only are you forging a taper, but you're actually kind of having the scale remove enough metal to matter, because this is now so thin that the amount of scale that comes off is a factor. Right. It gets thinner and thinner. You can see that rat tail is now almost 7 inches long, which I think is a good length. I'm going to start rounding that taper because it's thin enough, and as it scales, it'll actually get thinner and thinner. So I work the corners very carefully and gently. Okay, and so you can get an idea. I'll put a background down. That is a very thin point there. All right, we're going to go now and start making the knot. If I've had my Wheaties and really I'm paying attention, I should be able to do this knot with just the hammer and the anvil. The first thing is you need to start this teeny tiny little curl. Wee tiny. train coming through. Little tiny scroll. So that little tiny scroll was entirely done with the hammer and the anvil. I don't know if you can really see how tiny that is. Oops. Okay. Start working on the rest of the knot. If the train will let us. Now the real hard part is to work the rest of that without burning that tiny little scroll. That wee tiny little scroll off the end. So what I do is I poke a hole in the fire so that the scroll is not actually in the fire, and there's a bank of coals on top of just the area I want to heat up. That little scroll will still heat up, but it won't heat up as much. Got that hot, and what I want to do is take it over sideways to start the first loop of the knot. Now I can stick it in the fire with that little tiny scroll on the end up out of the fire, because I'm just sticking that corner that I made into the fire, and it'll heat up enough of the loop so that I can bring the loop around. So that I've made that loop. Okay. That might be a little fatter than I want, but it's still an acceptable loop. Now it goes back in the fire, again with that little tiny scroll sticking up in the air, so it doesn't get overly heated. Okay. Heat it up in the right place again. Okay, I need to pull that loop up a little higher. That's a little too small. Now, I will just have to go ahead and use one of those little scroll tong things. Like I said, if I'm really up on things, I can do this freehand, but I'm not above using a pair of scroll tongs when I have to. Okay, that's at least sort of in the ballpark of what we want this to look like. Yes. So at this point, what we've got is 2/3 of the knot and a little scroll on the end. So now I have to be very careful because I have to keep pretty close to the that little tiny scroll, again without burning it up. You don't want to burn up that cute little tiny scroll that we worked so hard to make. So we got to be delicate here. Heat the whole thing up slowly. Keep a sharp eye out on the end of that little scroll. I sometimes take the ladle, the sprinkler, off the forge and put a little water in it, and I can cool the little scroll off if I'm worried about damaging it. Just that little tiny bit. Now I bring this up and around. All right, needs a little more heat. It does cool off very quickly because they're very thin little sections at this point. All right, back in the fire. Alright, still trying to get enough heat. You only got about 10 seconds before those things cool off too much, and it's dangerous trying to grab them. Yep, cooled off on me again. I've got to pull a little length along this whole knot now to get enough to make the right kind of loop out here. Yes, because we want all three of those loops to be kind of even with each other. Working on it. Alright, cooled off again. Alright, gotta get that very top of the loop down a little bit. This is where selective heating is so useful. You need to be able to heat up just the part you want to move. Almost the knot that I want. I do need a little bit more up there. I'm moving this over. Up. Right. We're getting there, almost not. It is kind of hard when all you can get is about 10 seconds of heat before the important parts cool off. To get a little space for that. Yep. I accidentally hold on the scroll just a tiny bit, so I'll have to do a tiny bit of correction on the very end of that scroll. Just a tiny, tiny bit right there, I think. Okay, now the final finishing bit here is to give it a good wire brushing as it comes down from a heat, and very gently put as much of the knot into a flat plane as is practical. So very gently align all of the elements so that they lay kind of in a flat plane. You don't want things sticking up where they might get caught when they're being handled. And I still have a little unhappiness with part of that, so I think I'm going to be, what am I going to be? I'm going to be very much of a fuss budget and go after that last little tiny bit, one pearl. Yes, that might work. So, very carefully wire brush, very carefully make sure everything's still in that flat plane. You want the top knot to be centered, and you want the two side loops to be fairly symmetrical, and you want the little scroll to be tucked inside because it's delicate enough that it can be easily damaged. So all of that, here, I got a ruler here. That's not a perfect one. And that whole knot is one length of rat tail drawn off the bar. And let me measure it here. The finished knot is 1.5 inches high and 1.5 inches wide on a 3/4 inch bar, which is kind of what we were shooting for. Anyway, that's the demonstration for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.